Haha! Hello, hello, hello. Oh dear. Um, still, hopefully, very much so on the upswing after I caught COVID last week. Like I say, so we're picking up where we left off last week. So we're all good in the hood, as they say. So welcome once again, one and all, to another fantastic live stream today, where today we are going to be diving into something incredibly interesting. But yes, Who Nation, yes. Good evening. Galloway is interesting, from the Iraq War court appearance to the strangely impersonating a cat in Big Brother. Has he always just been mad, bad, or what was the change? Who knows? I think it was money. I will tell you that now. And there's some other Galloway stuff I would love to cover that he's done very recently. But yeah, my word, he's done a show recently where him and a panel of experts gather round and discuss who's really to blame for the invasion of Ukraine. Can you guess who? If you've been following the channel for any length of time, you probably know who he's going to blame. But yes, you'll have to excuse my coughing. Like I say, this is me coming out from the coronavirus. So fingers crossed. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's why. Oh,
there we go. There we go. Yeah, I don't know why my sound had, for some reason, it connected to something else instead of my microphone. So anyway, there we go. Service has been restored. Oh, pardon me. So you have to excuse me when I go coughing. I might have to just obtain a lozenge or something like that now. But yes. Anyway, hopefully sound will be back to normal. There we go. Yeah, just having confirmation that it's there. Back. Excellent. So let's see who we got in the chat this evening. So Colin, greetings from New York. Hello to you, sir. Cathal OG, evening to you. English Viking, good evening from a very snowy Denmark. Well, it was snowing quite hard earlier, but it seemed to have slowed down a bit. But it does look like we're in for a deluge. As I said on the Good Morning Walk, it's going to be very weird this coming Saturday, where it was absolutely glorious weather. I almost didn't even need a jacket on that walk, but we're probably going to have to go back to like full winter gear at this point. So that's going to be fun. Prinny Bird, greetings from the Pacific Northwest. Pardon me. Hello to you. David Walker, evening to you. Edgy Intellect, good evening to you. Careful with your Zelensky memes. We are very pro-Ukrainian in this channel, I'll have you know. That's your warning. Alexander, good evening to you. Simon says, yeah, great to hear from you. Marcina Gala, hello to you. Jay Hay, hello there. Mo Green, greetings from the Netherlands, expecting snow here. Pretty Bird llama hat. Yeah, that's what I could do. I could bring back the llama hat. That's very true. Something we haven't worn for quite a while. But anyway, what might you ask are we covering tonight? Because this is really a two-part video. Well, two-part stream. First of all, we're going to go over this article from the Daily Beast about I hope I say this right. Gonzalo Laria, who is better known by his more infamous, shall we say, YouTube name of Coach Redpill. And he is basically a dating coach. Now, why on earth would would Galloway, someone who professes to be a journalist now, someone who brings the news to the masses, be bringing on someone who is, well, a dating coach? Well, you can no doubt see the headline. Turns out he's basically a pro-Putin shill who happens to live in Ukraine. So we're going to go through this article first because, first of all, it explains who this guy is, what he's been up to, and then we're going to watch then we're going to go through the bizarre interview he has with George Galloway. And there's one clear thing. If you've been watching any of the coverage, not only of Galloway, but when we've done videos about any sort of the bad takes of Ukraine and the very pro Putin takes that a lot of people have been bizarrely putting out, it comes down to oh yeah, sorry, Edgy. Yeah, I misread your comment, so I'm very sorry for giving you that warning. Warning retracted, by the way. I've just read I misread your comment. I'm sorry about that. Do forgive me for that. But yes, you are right. Zelensky should definitely get this guy arrested for treason. You are right. But yeah, why on earth, if you're a serious news journalist like Galloway purports to be, why would you bring on this guy who, as the title says, a sleazy American dating coach and now a pro-Putin shill? Because he lives in Kharkiv. And one of the things I've said before, whenever we've covered people like this, the main criticism has been, you're saying one thing, but all the evidence that we have been seeing for the past month, even prior to the invasion of the build-up, of all that stuff, you just ignored it. You said, oh, it was never going to happen. Putin's never going to invade Ukraine. Yeah. So this is me coming out of COVID. But yes, we're going to go over this article because it sets up who this guy is, what he does, and then you're going to see it in action. And Galloway is going to endorse this guy as if he is some sort of like trusted source and narrative. And it gets even funnier because I couldn't track it down. I was looking for it before I went on air. He recently put out on his Twitter this really bizarre photoshopped, not even Photoshop, we're talking like clip art level of image production of what he was claiming is apparently captured by Russians, a plan to show the Ukrainians of how to use human shields. And it's a really bad clip art building with like people with their arms up like that. And then on the other floors, you've got the people with the guns and someone else on the roof with guns. Literally, I could make that in like maybe like 10 minutes with PowerPoint and clip art. It's pathetic. It really is. But anyway, we're going to go into this article because, well, boy, does it get interesting later on, especially when we get to this interview. So let's dive in then, shall we? So, as soon as Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine, Gonzo Laria started sharing his thoughts and observations on the conflict in a run of YouTube videos and posts on Telegram and Twitter. The commentary and analysis I post is without picking sides. Interesting. Very interesting that he he happens to actually say that, because if you go to his Twitter right now, he's literally fawning over a speech of Putin saying that the dollar and the euro are no longer going to be like the world's reserve currency, which, again, if you know anything about economics, certainly at this moment in time, the likelihood of that happening is zero. It ain't gonna happen. Lara, an American, no, Lyra, I don't know how you say his name. We're just going to call him Coach Redpill. Oh, dear me. An American who's lived in the eastern Ukraine city of Kharkiv for years and was in Kiev at the start of the offensive, wrote in a recent post, trying to be as balanced and as factually accurate as I can be. Well, let's say this article is going to show you how just factually accurate he can be. And when we get into the interview, you're going to see how balanced this guy really is. Oh, you had me so you had me so excited there. I thought you'd said that Galloway had brought on Katie Hopkins. I was like, oh my God, we're abandoning this and we're going to watch that. But bear in mind, with my track record for predicting Galloway's guests, that will probably happen not in the too near future. So he then began showing up on very niche but notable podcasts and live streams. What a surprise. Where host introduced him as an immediate front on the ground insights, as someone willing to share truths about this complex conflict that the mainstream media weren't either, or just can't or won't. He's also gained a slew of new followers. His Telegram now has about 45,000 followers, up from 20,000 on the March the 1st, and seems to be gaining hundreds every day. Many people view him as a valuable source and have taken to signal boosting his content. But his, quote, fair and balanced approach, and trust me, you can literally go and look at this guy's Twitter account. It ain't fair, and it certainly ain't balanced. He's very, very in the pro-Putin, pro-Russia camp on this. So his accounts, but his fair and balanced accounts often involved wild claims about the supposedly obvious evil of Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, and the comedian turned politician is known as Cokehead, as CPR has claimed, a man who uses his people as shields, as provided arms to criminals, and who have terrorized the streets of Kiev, and has possibly, according to him, deliberately tried to have a nuclear accident. So all that footage that we saw just a couple of weeks ago of the Russians attacking Chernobyl, which, again, boggles the mind of what could have potentially happened there, because that's never happened before. A military has never shot or fired weapons at a nuclear power plant. We have no idea what the consequences would be. Now, if you've seen Thunderthut's video, there was very unlikely to be a nuclear explosion, but there could have been far other, who knows what consequences we could have seen at that place. Yeah. It's also, yeah, you are right. It's word for word what we're accusing Putin of. Exactly. And tried to pin it on Russia to possibly drag America into his war. Meanwhile, CPR has portrayed the Russian assault as provoked and is one of the quotes. This is certainly in the running for the dumbest comment of the year. So I hope you're sitting comfortably. One of the most brilliant invasions in military history. Yes, this guy who George Galloway proudly got on his show says that it's apparently one of the most brilliant invasions in military history. How's that war been going for Russia? Not very well. Potentially, of what is rumored to be at least in the tens of thousands of losses. They've lost hundreds of tanks, airplanes. This is not going well for Russia, to a point where we saw last week where they had to, we're scaling back. We're just going to concentrate on the Donbass. Then why did you do that mad dash towards Ukraine? Oh, not Ukraine, towards Kiev. It was very, very blatantly obvious that Putin wanted to take Kiev as fast as he possibly could. Yeah, that's very true. Every time you show Galloway, you should show the cat clip. I might have to start doing that. To be honest, you are right. I might have to start doing that. He has insisted. Okay, this is where it gets. This is where it starts to get off the walls crazy now. He has insisted that the invaders don't want to harm civilians or citizen infrastructure, and are in fact taking pains not to, and that the Russian advance has not stalled, but is in fact on the right course, and that the Russian domination would likely be a good for Ukraine in the end. So apparently they're not attacking, quote, civilian infrastructure. Remember just a couple of weeks ago where they took out one of Europe's largest, I think it was like a steel working plant, and like the owner of it said, we can't restart the furnaces now. It will take they've pretty much destroyed the plant. It can't reopen. It will take hundreds, if not millions, of pounds of investment to try and restart all this. Oh, pretty bird! What's the cat clip? Oh, I'm not going to show it because Channel 4 might be quite heavy on the copyright claim. But just search George Galloway and cat. You'll find it very easily on YouTube. So yeah, we've now seen Putin is rescaling, and it does very much look like that we've seen a lot of inaction this week, probably because Putin is sort of pulling troops back from other areas and putting them more into the eastern part, especially around the Donbass area. And I think, as I said it before, Putin at the moment, there has been a peace talk conference today, but nothing came of it. I think you are not going to see any form of serious peace talks at least happen until Putin has at least the Donbass area or region in his control. Then he can basically just sit on it and just say, come and take it. I think that's now his new objective. And to be honest, given the state of the Russian army at the moment and how well the Ukrainians have held along that line, they've certainly got a good chance of denying that for quite some time. So anyway, back to this. He has also shared the widely debunked conspiracy theories to support or even build out his narratives. Many of them revolve around Russian claims that they found evidence of, oh, remember when we had this a couple of weeks ago? American bioweapon labs and research in Ukraine. He has decried stories about Ukrainian resistance as obvious Western propaganda and has accused people who contradict his assessments of being idiots or paid shills. Independent experts who follow the conflict closely, of course, vigorously disagree. His claims are nonsense, said Alexander Mortev, an expert on the Ukrainian affairs at Rutgers University, who's been monitoring the conflict, told the Daily Beast. Not only do CPR's narratives fly in the face of the vast amount of credible, on-the-ground reporting, they fit perfectly with what Putin and his associates have been claiming for months. As Molotov put it, in fact, CPR has been in such striking lockstep with Russian narratives on the conflict, he's sometimes even posting official government statements as definitive truth about it. So if there's anything you do not want to be probably quoting as a valid source as a valid source during this war, you so most certainly do not want to be quoting the known and quote reliable Russian intelligence service. Yeah. Can you already see how good this interview is going to be? And this is just the appetizer. This is why I'm going through this article to begin with, because you don't get the full flavor. You just don't get the full flavor if you don't go through this first and then you watch the interview. Trust me, I'm serving you up a fantastic meal to come. Oh yeah, that's a good point actually. Yeah, from what we know of like the loss rates, we don't know the official loss rate because Russia has been obviously not telling people, but the numbers are insane. The numbers, if they are true, like what some of these analysts are like looking at the conflict and saying, like, they are insane. There was also a piece a couple of weeks ago about a very pro-Kremlin news source. Again, whether it was hacked or whether it was done as, with malicious intent, or maybe it is true and they know the actual figures and they decided that they want to put it out. That source quoted at least in the tens of thousands, which, if it is true, is absolutely insane and completely an unsustainable loss. In fact, one of the other interesting things that popped up this week as well, we've seen the quote soldiers from the quote unquote Donbass Republic in a Russian vehicle complaining personally to the guy who is they've said is their president, saying that the Russians have been using them as cannon fodder. Very, very interesting. That very, very interesting indeed. If like I say, that video has been flying around on YouTube, not YouTube, on Twitter for a while, and it's like this was like the Russian military machine that we were all meant to be scared and terrified of. What happened to it? You know, what happened? Did you know there was always very, very often this undercurrent which often got poo-pooed by like the Russian experts. And that theory was that, look, there's so much corruption happening in Russia. What's to say that this actually hasn't affected the army? And that used to get, you know, poo-pooed by experts. But I think we're seeing the merits to that argument. I think we're really seeing the merits that, yeah, the corruption in Russia did affect the army, that they really weren't training them well, providing them with weapons and tactics, and instead just doing whatever they wanted. This is absolutely crazy that we're seeing this. But, you know, what can I say? Serves Putin right, I suppose. Yeah, that's a fair point. How long would have the Russian military actually lasted against a total shock and awe campaign against NATO? This has really got military analysts really, really thinking and replaying this. Now, obviously, you know, nuclear weapons, of course, but even then, you've got to ask the question: is Russia's nuclear stockpile of its nuclear weapons, have they been maintained properly? Do they even still work? Are they even launch capable? If this is the state of the Russian military, that a lot of analysts used to say it's a really big, you know, potential problem. We've got to worry about this. Then what is their true state of their military, of like their nuclear armaments? You know. Where are we now? It was sort of lockstep with Russian narratives on the conflict, sometimes even posting official government statements as definitive truth about it. Well, says everything there. And of course, that Russian propaganda outlets have also used clips of him as a supposed source of external, on-the-ground support for his stories. Well, at least we know where he got all those followers from. More telling, when Alexander Hedkar, a Ukrainian affairs expert who works at Reed College and has been monitoring the conflict, first reviewed CPR's claims, she assumed that he was likely a fictional persona created by the Kremlin to spread its message. These sort of covert mouthpieces often claim to be a fair and balanced outside expert, she noted, and tend to argue that their opponents are irrational, emotional, and need to consider the facts. That's, wow, what a burn that is. What an absolute burn. I'm sorry, but when an expert comes out and says and looks at your like social media feed to a point where it goes, yeah, I think this person's fake and not real. Yeah. Of course, CPR is not fake, nor is there any evidence that, of course, he's a paid Russian agent. In fact, he's actually attempted to publicly distance himself from the propaganda content that uses his clips. But until just months before this conflict started, he didn't appear to present himself as a citizen journalist. What a surprise. or even a Ukraine expert, or a foreign policy buff, or a war nerd. He was a, quote, medium-sized Manosphere YouTuber. And according to Manuel Hotario Rebano, I pronounced that right, a researcher at Switzerland, I'm not going to pronounce even that, I'm not even going to attempt that. Rebano studies the digital space is a loose collection of blogs, forums, social media accounts inhabited by pickup artists, men rights activists, and incels. Well, what a fantastic expert you've got on your program, Galloway. Most of those who dwell in this world believe that men are the true oppressed gender, despite clear evidence that women still face undeniable and rampant systematic discrimination across the globe. Under the name Coach Redpill, which we have been referring to as CRP, CRP made videos and again hosted digital seminars in which he offered dating, life, and relationship advice. In the Manosphere, a red-pilled person is someone who specializes, who realized the hidden supposed truths about gender and relationships. And these are usually tied to stereotypes about how all women are supposedly thick, reactionary ideas about the glory of traditional gender roles, and relations on how their erosion screws over men. Some of CPR's content is offered, quote, reasonable run-of-the-mill tips on things like financial literacy. And according to George Michael, a professor of criminal justice at the Westfield State University and an expert on the far-right groups who's been watching Coach Redpill videos now for years, but, Ribeiro added, most of his content was steeped in the old and reductive views on gender and society, as well as the outright vile misogyny often defended using questionable interpretations of evolutionary psychology. So yeah, this is Coach Redpill. This is who this guy is, and yet we are about to see what we've just read through. You are about to see him be brought on as a qualified expert on this Ukraine situation. Yet he is not a foreign policy expert. He's not a Ukraine expert. He's not a war buff. He's not anything of the sort. And trust me, as I said before, I am preparing you for your meal to come. This is but the appetizer, because it's important that you understand who this guy is that Galloway's brought on first, to understand how bad it is, how bad or desperate you have to be to try and prove that, quote, Russia is the good guy in this, which of course Galloway is still pushing. So he said, never date a woman in her 30s, CPR, who's in his 50s, said in one video, created back in 2020. He also argued that irrespective of what they claim they want, all women truly desire money, a house, and kids, as child rearing is the one thing that will biologically validate them. Oh my word. What on earth? Yeah. Wow. And that, of course, that women who are, quote, single and childless in their 30s have supposedly ignored that imperative in order to live the hedonistic lifestyle that degenerate Western culture pushes towards them. What an alt-right talking point. What an alt-right talking point he's pushing there. And, of course, culture pushes towards them chasing the hottest 15% of guys for meaningless sex. And, of course, when they hit their 30s, they all get the baby rabies. Do I need to go on at this point? Do I need to generally go on at this point, or are you just, or do you just want to go on to the main course? Because I think I've proved that this article's proved this point of this. It's proved the point of just the guy that this Galloway's brought on. No, you want more? Well, Okay, we'll continue that. And of course, they get the baby rabies. They realize their looks are fading. It's biology, he said. Women age badly, men age like wine. So they are all, quote, supposedly lie and connive to trick men into marriage and pregnancy, after which they reveal their true faces. Oh my word. One, of course, of his earliest posts in a very prominent Manosphere forum, CPR warned that HR departments are exceedingly dangerous to anyone who's been red-pilled. But he offered a guide on how men could supposedly turn these departments into a powerful weapon by learning how to manipulate HR staffers, who he argued are predominantly women who, in high school, were, quote, slutty looking and used to gossip and create all kinds of drama. Women who are, quote, the most easily manipulated and often easily taken in by flattery and deference. Yeah, I'm speechless. I really am speechless, and yet this is the guy who Galloway has brought on. Wow. Yes, you are. You are right there, Edgy. Yep. Incel talking points. So CPR's rapid transformation from self-styled relationship expert to small but prominent peddler of pro-Putin hot takes and conspiracies may seem bizarre. It does indeed seem bizarre. But according to experts on, of course, both the Manosphere and Russian misinformation, such a pivot actually makes sense. It speaks to the long simmering trends in both worlds, which kicked into a very high gear when the Ukraine conflict starts. CPR declined to respond to questions of the Daily Beast sent him about his decision to shift away from his Manosphere-centric content towards dedicated to Ukraine conflict commentary, or about the information that he chooses to share, where he finds it, and how he assesses or even frames it, or any other of the topics we've discussed in this article. Instead, he posted the Daily Beast's communications with him on his social media channels, and he claimed in one post that he did so to entertain his followers and that they should thank, quote, the Daily Beast for the lols. He also created a 22-minute long video preemptively warning his followers not to trust anything the Daily Beast writes, concocting a fanciful narrative in which every journalist secretly knows that he and his ilk are right about the things that they say, but choose to print the lies because, quote, everybody who works at the mainstream media is by definition a piece of shit. Do you remember a couple of weeks ago where we went over Russell Brand and the article about how Russell Brand is trying to like concoct his own narrative? Bizarrely, if we went back and had a look at that article, we changed, probably not like, you know, the misogynist stuff, but if you looked and changed that commentary about the creation of the atmosphere or the environment that Russell Brand is creating for his followers, it's exactly the same environment that this guy is creating as well. He also added that it is better than the mainstream media because he can, quote, say the truth, and, quote, suggested that this article was developed at least partly because the Daily Beast writers envy and resent his freedom. This attitude, again, towards the press and, again, CPR's affinity for pro-Russian views is far from shocking, given the environment in which he's operated for years now. The Manosphere is a very murky and chaotic space, riven by internal divisions about the exact nature of masculinity and the ideal approach to relationships. CPR has in the past indicated that he dislikes incels and has even thrived in that larger subculture that they actually inhabit. But Most of it is diverse factions that are united at their distaste for Western values and policies on gender equality connected to them, because they believe those norms ultimately hurt men. Experts on this world told the Daily Beast that members of the Manosphere also tend to be, quote, skeptical of the mainstream media, often viewing it as a source of propaganda created to slander them and bolster the supposedly harmful, incorrect ideas like feminism. What a surprise. Again, incel talking points, as Edge pointed out very well here just a moment ago. Of course, meanwhile, over the last decade, Putin's regime has aggressively promoted the importance of traditional gender roles to Russia, he explained to Harkiv. It's done so in part by elevating groups and commentators who decry the supposed horrors of Western feminism and or gender and sexual freedom and rights. Russia has also attempted to appeal to even build ties with the anti-woke communities in the West, like the Manosphere. So, again, it's not a surprise pivot, as it was said earlier on. And of course, as part of its ongoing efforts to sow division and discord within its rivals' borders, he added that Raoul's created a scholar at the Glasgow University who studies his nation's communication strategies. In recent years, the Manosphere has grown increasingly intertwined with the far-right networks and influences, soaking up the radical fringes' resonant but distant ideas about the evils of the West, and of course the adoration for Putin and his strongman politics as well. They are escaping the entanglement, Roberto and other researchers have shown, is now turning the Manosphere into an ever more conspiratorial and radical environment, and a pipeline for sending often young, dissatisfied men down deeper rabbit holes of extremism. So again, something else we probably have to worry about now in the future. So it should not come as no surprise that, again, according to the experts, the Daily Beast consulted for this story, that many figures in the Manosphere embrace Russia as a bastion of traditional values that speaks the truth to Western powers, and the, quote, trust in Russian narratives over Western ones, and the pro-Putin sentiment could arise in this space. Anytime the nation says in the news, Ribeiro said, due to conspiracy theories or even straight-up contrarianism. However, to date, most of the chatter experts have observed about the Ukraine conflict across the Manosphere has been piecemeal, focused on attempting to try and relate the crisis back to their own issues. Ribeiro has noted the occasional link to the bioweapon conspiracy theories on the incel boards, for example, but far more talk about the perceived injustice of Ukraine's decision to draft men into military service while allowing women and children to flee. This outrage, of course, ignores the many women serving in the Ukrainian military and, of course, civilian women staying behind to even fight or even support the resistance. Tracy Fresnel, a British Manosphere researcher based out in the Open University's Knowledge Media Institute, says that she's seen posts about how hosting, quote, women refugees is a good opportunity for incels to take advantage of their vulnerability. Oh, my word. Oh, my word. Wow. Holy moly. Holy moly. This is wow. Wow. I'd read half of this article. I hadn't read the full things of it, but wow, it's gotten even more dangerous. Holy moly. Holy moly. What scumbags. What scumbags. And again, according to publicly available materials and his own statements, CPR has a long track record of jumping between careers. In the late 90s, he wrote a very pulpy action novel about, quote, manly men, and in the aughties, he switched over to filmmaking for a spell. Then, around the 2010, he refashioned himself as a supposed expert in economics, writing for the commentary of the Business Insider and Zero Hedge, and appearing as a pundit on, quote, alternative media programs. So Lyra also appears to have a BA in history and philosophy from Dartmouth, but no discernible economics background. Well, what a surprise. Steve Kane, a relatively well-known Australian economist, told the Daily Beast that CPR contacted him out of nowhere about a decade ago to complain about Keen's analysis and suggested that they work together on a project. Ultimately, Keen said that CPR posed to pay a subscription content creation model where he claimed he could effectively market for the two of them. Keane added that that when he looked up Lara and saw how the figures that he knew, again in the alt media world, had interviewed him, he also figured he must be somewhat credible and decided to give it a shot. It is experience I regret, he told the Daily Beast. He said that CPR overstated and overpromised what he could do and then underdelivered. He claimed that CPR was arrogant and even rude to Keane's other employers and collaborators, and at least hesitated on many of their departures. What a surprise. Oh, but anyway, yes. Do we really have to continue on this? Do we really have to continue about this? Because honestly, I think I've proven the point of this. Yeah, the FSB came for me. Yeah, do we really have to continue? Oh, well, we'll continue it. Tell you what, we'll continue because I don't think it's that. Oh no, it is actually quite long. There's still got a lot to go. Tell you what, we're gonna abandon this article back because I think I've proved the point. I've proved the point on what an absolute well, how sleazy this guy is, and it's now time for you to see the interview. It's well past time for you to see the interview because oh my word, share screen. You can see my wire. There you go. There we go. Interview audio. So there we go. Get that sorted out. There we go. So you've now seen that article. And you now know who this guy Galloway, again, Galloway, who proclaims he is a journalist and is doing this for journalist intention. This is what he is now. He reports the news. Yet, why would you bring on this guy? After what we've just been through, on this, do you really think that his takes are going to be good? So get ready, because this is going to get wild.
Gonzalo Lira, welcome on board the show. Give us an idea of you, if you will, of the current state of play in your city.
Well, first of all, George, thank you very much for having me on. It's very much appreciated. Thank you. And your kind words, I think that you overstate bravery and certainly intelligence. Because a smart man, would he be in this position? No, I don't think so. So anyway, yeah, I'm in Kharkov. I'm in the center of the city. And yeah, today, as a matter of fact, I did a little tour of it. And it's the long and short of it is that at this time we're a little bit over almost 4 weeks into this invasion, 3.5 weeks, and it's clear that the Russians are winning. And the way that they have been conducting this war is more or less what I said at the very beginning of this conflict, which was.
Did you hear what you just said then? It's quote, very clear at the moment the Russians are winning. I don't think so. I definitely don't think so. The Russians are nowhere near winning. So right off the bat, you can tell where his loyalties lie. You can tell exactly where his loyalties lie in all this.
The Russians don't seek to destroy Ukraine. They seek to capture it whole, and as with as little damage as possible given the circumstances.
Yes, I'm sure. Again, anyone could agree to that after seeing the pictures of Mariupol and what's been going on there for the past couple of weeks. Yes, I'm sure the city of Mariupol was captured, and no buildings were destroyed. All the infrastructure was intact, and it was all hunky dory. Have I been saying it wrong? It's CRP, not CPR. Well, true. I may have missaid that wrong. If I do so, I apologize. Yeah, of course, the Russians blame Azov for leveling Mariupol, of course, when it was them who had all the the aircraft, the artillery that surrounded Mariupol. And oh yeah, by the way, good news on that front, by the way. The Azov battalion has been wiped out. Again, thus defeating the whole one of the initial ideas for the invasion that Ukraine needs to be Nazified. So that's it now, guys. War's over. You can go home. Job done. Because yeah, the Azov battalion's headquarters was in Mariupol. The Azov battalion has been wiped out. I don't know if you've seen that news. So all the people through the past couple of weeks have been going, "Oh my God, what about Azov? What about Azov? What about Azov?" It's been wiped out. Exactly my thoughts as well. Exactly my thoughts as well on that.
And the other thing too is that they are trying to capture the Ukraine army. Now, that might not seem like what they're doing to people who don't understand military matters, but the way that the Russians have been.
Whoa, what? First of all, apparently the Russians have been, quote, trying to capture the Ukrainian military. Definitely hasn't seen that way, nor to the fact that he's just alluded to the fact, oh, those people who aren't learned in the ways of war like I am. This is why we went over that article first. He knows nothing about war. He is not an expert in war. He's not an expert in Russia. He's not an expert on Ukraine. He is not an expert in anything that would give him the right to sort of talk about this with any expert authority.
Conducting this war, it's clear that their intention is to capture both the country and the Ukrainian armed force. And within the Ukrainian armed force, there are quite frankly, the fascist element. And I do not say that lightly.
Which has been wiped out.
who just accuse anybody that they don't like of being a fascist. I mean, last I heard on Twitter, J.K. Rowling is a fascist because of her opinions on various matters. No, these are actual fascists, and they are proud of it. And these fascists were instrumental in the 2014 coup d'etat. And after 2014...
again, 2014, I'm sorry, was not a coup d'etat. Again, anyone who is saying that the Maidan revolution in Ukraine back in 2014 was some sort of attempted coup, I highly, highly recommend, if you've got a Netflix account, you can watch it on Netflix, but Netflix has actually put it for free on YouTube. So you can go look it up. It's called Winter on Fire. It's an absolutely fantastic documentary and gives you everything you need to know about the Ukrainian people's fight for freedom. It was not a coup. Far, far from it. And trust me, if you see like the oppression that they were being put through, of course they were going to get rid of him. Remember, the guy who got voted, who was the president at that time, Winter on Fire. That's it. Very good documentary. If you haven't watched it, highly, highly recommend going watch it. It proves everything wrong of what people like this guy and even Galloway will say, that it was a coup. It was an American organized coup. No, these people were legitimately fighting for freedom. But of course, again, it fits very nicely into the narrative, of course, that it was America. America did it all. Oh.
They were supposedly disbanded, but what actually happened was that they were absorbed into the Ukrainian army.
Again, that's false. They weren't disbanded. They were not absorbed into the Ukrainian army. The Ukraine set up a organization which essentially organized under the military was tried to basically organize all these militia groups, because they were basically in desperate need of these militia groups at that time. So they were like, let's get these militia guys in. Let's get them at least somewhat organized, so that if Russia does invade, we will stand a somewhat decent chance. And I think history has certainly proven that was a very, very prudent action for them to take. Yes, apparently he is in Kharkiv, from what we know, Paul. As far as we are aware, he is in Kharkiv. Which, again, is kind of funny, considering how Kharkiv is like a center of the battleground. We've seen shelling of civilian districts in that area. So, again, they're just trying to, capture the infrastructure. They're not doing any damage, Yeah. Yeah, sure they are. Yeah.
Forces at all levels, in all units. They weren't discrete units within the Ukrainian armed forces. There are certain battalions, famously the Azov battalion and the Aidan battalion, that are independent units. But for the most part, these fascist elements are spread out throughout the Ukrainian armed forces.
Again, that's false. He's got no statement to actually prove that or even back that up. There is only the Azov battalion, and as I said, last week they got wiped out. They got wiped out. Did he? Did he? Oh, that's quite hilarious. If that's true, that is hilarious. If he got kicked out of his hotel because they heard him spreading pro-Putin propaganda. That's hilarious.
And these are the people that the Russians very badly want to take out. They want to preserve the Ukrainian armed force for later, because it's very clear that the Russians have no intention of conquering and absorbing Ukraine. They want it to be an independent state, but simply friendly to them, friendly to Russia. And by the way, my commentary on insofar as this conflict is
again, if Putin wanted Ukraine to be friendly to Russia, he's gone in a bad way about it. He's gone in a bad way about it. I mean, this dates back all the way to, of course, the annexation of Crimea. Yeah, wow. Wow, literally, wow.
concerned, I have to emphasize this point, if you will allow me. My interest is to make this conflict as short as possible with as little loss of life as possible. And that's why I try to be as realistic as possible, because I think that what happened...
The best way to sort of end this conflict very quickly would be for Russia to just go, okay, we lost, and just pull out. That would be the quickest way to end this conflict. That would be the quickest way, my friend.
And is that the Ukrainian leadership, the EU and the United States and NATO, they led the Ukrainian people down the garden path, the primrose path of believing that Ukraine would one day join NATO, join the EU, and that once that
happened, is joining the EU, but it's certainly not joining NATO.
It would be a wonderful life. And because of this, they goaded the Russians. The Ukrainian government goaded the Russians, and it got to a point where the Russians realized that no promise made by the West would ever be fulfilled.
Goaded how? I have to ask this serious question. Goaded how? Because certainly he's not going to present any evidence that Ukraine has been goading Russia. Because the last thing Ukraine wanted was to be invaded by Russia. Hence why it was so they've been desperate to join NATO, because they wanted that protection. And they've joined the EU because they didn't want to be economically tied to Russia, which is literally a sinking economic ship. Not only have some people been telling me recently that not only is their economy in a nosedive, but their population is also in a nosedive as well. So Russia's got some big problems to deal with, but trying to take and absorb Ukraine would certainly be an impossibility for them. They ain't going to achieve it, I'll tell you that now. And it's very obvious this week that they've realized that and had to scale back operations to try and probably save as much face as they possibly can.
Specifically the Minsk agreements that were signed in 2014 and were never fulfilled.
The Minsk agreements, Russia broke twice. They broke them twice. It was Russia who broke those agreements.
Filled and the Zelensky regime and the previous regime would stretch out and just sort of like ignore and just not do what was supposed to be done vis-a-vis the agreement. And so the Russians realized this on the one hand, and on the other hand, they realized that the Ukrainians, and what is appearing now to be the trigger for this conflict, the Ukrainians seem to have been on the
trigger for what? What was Ukraine doing that was quote unquote so threatening to Russia that they decided to launch a full-scale invasion? It was the Ukrainian people using their democratic rights to say, well, we want to be in NATO because we are really worried about Russian aggression. So we want to be in NATO to at least protect us from that. And of course, they would have never have joined NATO because of the issue in Transnistria between them and Moldova. That issue alone stopped them from joining NATO. Like, they could not join NATO. So, and that's been going on since like 1991. So they have not been able to join NATO for some time. Now, joining the EU is, again, an economic bloc. And Ukraine wants to move west. It wants to look away from Russia. It's not interested in being economically tied to Russia because the economic, again, it explains this actually in Winter on Fire. It talks about the economic treaty that Russia had put on the table would basically tie the Ukraine to Russia forever, permanently. And I think it was like talking about eventually getting rid of their own currency, and even eventually introducing like the Russian ruble. That's how economically close tied they were going to be. So it wasn't just a simple, quote, economic policy. It was, oh, by the way, Russia controls your economic policy now. You don't get a say in it.
Brink of invading the Donbass. And they had amassed their army on the east, on the right on the contact.
Ever since the separatists started this war, there has been a significant presence in that area. That's nothing new, but saying that they were going to invade the Donbass. No, they weren't. Ukraine fully knew that invading the Donbass would have been a bad idea. But they were actually steadily winning. If you look at the original lines of demarcation back again in 2008, the Ukrainian military had actually pushed them back quite significantly. They didn't need to invade because they pretty much won almost at that point. And Putin, again, when you look at the map, how far they'd pushed them back, it was very likely that in probably a couple of years' time, they would have easily pushed them completely out of the Donbass region and essentially into Russia. And Putin didn't want that.
Line. And remember when the United States and Europe kept saying that the Russians were surrounding Ukraine, were amassing troops on the border with Ukraine?
They were. That was very obvious. That was very obvious. And again, he's repeating the lie that Galloway was repeating no more than a couple of weeks, that, there's no Russian military troops of a build-up around this border. It's a complete lie, that they're lying to you to try and provoke some sort of war narrative. Whoopsie doopsie, look what happened.
Well, it was a weird kind of projection because that's what the Ukraine armed forces were doing. They were amassing their armies in the east for a final conquest of the breakaway republics of Lugansk and Donetsk. And what happened was that the Russians, in essence, beat them to the punch. And that's why, because they were amassed there on the east, right on the contact line, that's why the Russians have been able to encircle that army, which numbers some 60,000 soldiers. And it's very important to understand these are 60,000 frontline combat troops. They've surrounded them. They're actually in about.
This is. You might not have heard this before. This is the new thing that pro-Putin shills are pushing. They're pushing the fact that, again, using maps that are not accurate, they are pushing for the fact that apparently the Russian army is currently any day now about to encircle the Ukrainian army in the east, and that once they do, the war will be over. Any day now, that's going to happen. Remember, this video is about a week old. They've been saying that now for at least 3 weeks. So just so you know, that's yet another propaganda piece that is being, heard by your ears. but just so you know.
4 different cauldrons, they're called, which is basically pockets that are surrounded by Russian forces. And the Russians basically have cut off the major cities, Kiev, Kharkov, Mariupol, Lugansk, Donetsk. They've cut them off. Well, Lugansk and Donetsk are now under control of the Russians, but they've cut off the cities.
They've only really cut off Mariupol. They haven't cut off Kiev. In fact, they failed to actually do the surround. You know? Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they've even put Lviv on the western border so they could encircle the Ukrainian military in the east. Yeah, exactly. This is the thing. Whenever you hear one of these pro-Putin shills, and you only have to look up with your own eyes what's going on in Ukraine. Their stories don't make any sense. They're fanciful about what he's saying here about any day now, the Ukrainian army is going to be encircled. They're all going to be encircled, and it's all going to be over, quickly. It's all going to be bish, bash, bosh, all done and dusted. They've been saying that now for 3 weeks.
And cut off the armies. There's no longer a centralized defensive strategy by the Ukrainians. And so it's just a matter of time. When you have a divided army and divided defenses, that's what's currently happening. It's just a matter of time before the attacking forces, in this case the Russians, they're going to take over. And by the way,
it's not a matter of time, ladies and gentlemen. I'll tell you why. Ladies and gentlemen. It's not a matter of time. I'd like to lead you all now in a prayer to the patron saint of Ukraine, Saint Javelin. Saint Javelin, may your missiles be accurate, and may they kill many a Russian tank. Let them be left by smoking craters. Amen. Saint Javelin, you absolute beauty. Oh. And even then, you are right. Guerrilla warfare, Simon. Yeah, you are right. Guerrilla warfare. We know that for a while now, a lot of these the Americans have been teaching them about decentralized warfare. There is a lot of talk about being saying, look, if the Ukraine army did actually fall, all they do is just, right, we're going to disperse and just start engaging in guerrilla asymmetrical warfare. The fact that this week, by the way, again, if you've been following this conflict, you'll have seen very recently, Ukraine now has its own dedicated drone assault unit, which is really, really interesting. Oh, thank you very much, Cathology, towards a treat. Thank you very much. I'll definitely put it towards a treat. But yeah, these this is really, really crazy. And yeah, you're right. Centralized command in war, in a war like this, isn't an asset. Giving power to local commands who know the situation in the terrain is always the best thing. You have good local commanders and trust. Yeah, this is it. I'm so glad I've got such a good audience. You are seeing through this guy like, a hot knife through butter. I'm so happy. I really am.
Reason they call this strategy the cauldron, because what they do is they surround a pocket of resistance or a group of soldiers or a city. They surround it and then slowly start turning up the heat, like on a cauldron. And it's a famous strategy that the Russians have employed from the beginning of the 19th century. It's nothing new. It's slow, grinding, methodical. And this is how the Russians are winning this conflict. And what's really interesting is that so many people in the commentariat in the West think that the Russians are losing. And you wonder why, because the Russians are taking over towns. The Russians.
True, but they have taken nothing that is strategically important. In fact, they only, I think, took one city down south, and that was 3 weeks. Was it 2 weeks ago now? So they've only managed to take like one city. Bear in mind, I think in that same time of the war for Iraq, we had taken all of Iraq. Like, just to compare, like, the speed of invasions. Oh, thank you very much, Stuart. Thank you very much for your donation there. So, this is such a... This is the, like I said, if you haven't heard this before, this is one of the things that they're pushing at the moment. They're saying, "Oh my God, look at these cauldrons! Look at these cauldrons! The Ukrainians are surrounded." You've been pushing that for the past 2 to 3 weeks now. You don't seem to have been able to surround them.
Russians are advancing troops, and you're trying to understand, why do the very, very smart people in the West think that the Russians are losing? And then you understand why.
Here's the thing. Stalemate is a win for Ukraine, because Russia economically cannot fight this war indefinitely. There is, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, there was, I think it was a couple of economists on a was saying, look, Russia can't fight this war for more than 3 months. It literally economically just can't. It will just bankrupt itself in trying to do so. And we're already seeing, from what we've seen, there is already economic turmoil happening in Russia. They literally cannot. So it doesn't matter if Ukraine loses territory, because a stalemate is a victory for Ukraine. So, again, this guy is completely wrong on what is happening on the ground. In his own face, he probably hasn't even looked outside his window.
It took me a while for me to figure it out, because we are so used to, over the last 30 years, that when the Americans go to war, how do they go to war? They send their Air Force.
They do it properly.
To completely bombard a city, destroy it, annihilate it. They start with the infrastructure, with the electrical grid, telephony. Then they go after water mains, heating.
Yep. Praise Lord Skiff and St. Javelin. Praise them indeed.
Heating systems, whatnot. They just systematically destroy all of the infrastructure in the city. And this causes enormous damage to the civilian population, which is either killed or left homeless or flees. And once they have softened up,
20%, I believe it is currently at I believe. I'm sure you can look this up and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's something like 20% of Ukraine's population has fled. And I think that it's the child population, it's something like 60%. Or something like that, like 60% of like children below like the age of 12 are now refugees, and they're all from the east, all from these areas of conflict. And you are right. Yeah, Russia hasn't even established air dominance Russia hasn't established air dominance. That's the insane thing. This was what many people were worried about in initial phases. Many of who were like the Russian experts looking at this and going, "Oh, we've got to be worried about Russian air power." Quite rightly so for what we saw in Syria, and and especially what happened to Grozny. We have to be worried. We've seen what the Russians are capable of just literally flattening a city. We've seen them do it. So it's very, very worrying that's why so many people were worried at the start of this. So worried at the start of this war that's what was going to happen. And that's what has happened to Mariupol.
Up, quote unquote, a city like this, which is just basically annihilating the city. Then the Americans, or NATO, or call them what you will, the global American empire, the GAE, they roll in essentially a mopping up operation. They've destroyed the city, and then they roll in and take it over. And of course, by that time, there's no resistance whatsoever, and the pockets of resistance are trivial. But the Russians don't fight the war like that. They're not interested in destroying the cities. On the contrary, they want to maintain the cities and
yes, maintain the cities like what happened with Mariupol. Yes, that city well maintained by the Russians. Well maintained by the Russians.
Minimize civilian casualties as much as they can. What they want to do is to neutralize the opposing armed force. And notice, it's neutralized, not destroy. The Russians are just as happy if somebody surrenders or if an opposing army deserts. They're not trying.
I also as well want to point out something he's probably not going to mention. You may remember just again a week ago, the mayor that got kidnapped. I still think we don't know what happened to him. I still think we don't know where he is or what's happened to him, as far as I'm aware. What happened to him? And of course, the pro-Russian replacement that wasn't even Ukrainian, that was brought across the border to replace him.
To kill. They're trying to eliminate the threat that the opposing armed force poses. And so that mentality, frankly, is far more humane. And it makes you realize that the American mode of war that we in the West have become accustomed to over the last 30 years is really despicable.
So apparently, according to him, somehow, Russia is engaging in a ethical war. And yet you've only got to look at what's happened to Mariupol, what's happened to other various towns and cities, seeing civilian areas being bombed with no military equipment in them. Let's just ignore that little message, of course.
I mean, you start to realize I am a conservative. Politically, I am conservative. But you and I are probably on opposite sides of the spectrum on a whole host of issues. But when I used to hear men of the left, such as yourself, say that George Bush was a war criminal and Bill Clinton was a war criminal, and
yeah. So now he's going to go into essentially justifying Russian war crimes, essentially. So yeah, this is going to be a thing.
and all the rest of it. I was like, yeah, okay. But comparing the way the Russians carry out a war and comparing it to how the Americans have carried out a war, I stand corrected. I have to fully agree that the American leaders, people like Tony Blair.
Okay. Okay, I am not justifying what happened in Iraq in any way, shape, or form. I want to be clear on that. What America did and us did in Iraq, compared to what the Russians are currently doing in Ukraine, Iraq looks like a teddy bear's picnic. Now, yes, you can complain about that, and there are obviously valid criticisms you can make of the war in Iraq. But to say that what's happening in Ukraine, with what we have seen, the destruction of cities like Mariupol, of bombings of civilian areas, the evidence is plain as day. And if you don't believe me, there is a Vice News episode. I warn you, it's very gruesome, but it covers what's been going on in eastern Ukraine. There is the hospital that they show where they are running out of morgue space, not for military casualties, but for civilian casualties because of the bombing. And while Vice News were there at that hospital, a whole new series of casualties came in because a missile had struck a line of people queuing up at a supermarket. How on earth? and bear in mind, we got some stuff wrong in Iraq. We absolutely got stuff wrong in Iraq. There were civilian casualties. I'm not denying that there weren't. But the whole idea that you can say what's going on in Ukraine is fine. It's ethical. It's ludicrous. It's absolutely. This is the most ludicrous thing I ever said. And I did say this video was bad. I did say this video was bad. In fact, yeah, edgy intellect. You've got it right on the money here. Fascist lecturing on the ethics of war. That is exactly what you are hearing in this video.
Blair, like George W. Bush, they truly are war criminals. They committed unspeakable atrocities.
And Putin's not?
That served no purpose. They were just, it was wanton destruction. Because I'm seeing how the Russians are carrying out the war. I am in the middle of Kharkov, and I am speaking to you over cell phone. I have internet. I have running water. I have sewage. I have heat, which is crucial in Eastern Europe. Electricity, of course. I mean, everything is normal because the Russians did not go out to destroy the civilian infrastructure. They are not trying to conquer cities. They're trying to neutralize the opposing armed force. And you realize that this is the civilized way of waging war. I mean, war is by definition.
Yes, what Russia is doing is the civilized way of waging war. Good God. Good Lord. I'd forgotten how bad this was. This is the civilized way of waging war, ladies and gentlemen.
Violent and barbaric, but there are degrees of barbarism, and this is as humane as possible the way that they are carrying it out. And then you realize that analysts in the West since they're so used to this total destruction and annihilation of cities and the complete ruin of the people that are being conquered, then you realize that, yeah, of course, from their point of view, since the Russians are not destroying everything in their path, they're quote unquote losing the war, which is,
as Tu just said here, yeah. Tell that to Mariupol. We've seen the footage from Mariupol. It's been completely destroyed, and yet they don't want to conquer cities. I mean, I really don't want this to happen, but if he ends up in a situation like Mariupol where he is in Kharkiv, if Kharkiv is to become like the next Mariupol and get surrounded, first of all, I don't think this guy's going to stay. He's gonna flee. He's gonna piss his pants and run for the hills. He knows what's really going on there. He can't be blind to this. He's just parroting pro-Putin propaganda. But he ain't going to stay in Kharkiv. He ain't going to stay there. Especially after what's happened in Mariupol. He's never, ever in a month of Sundays going to stay in Kharkiv if what happens in Mariupol starts to happen in Kharkiv. And I really hope that doesn't happen. But the chance of him, yeah, and then we'll see what his, quote, civilized version of warfare really looks like. You'll get an up close and personal taste of it.
The situation we're at. Anyway, I've ranted a little bit. Ask me anything.
No, you haven't. It's been absolutely riveting, fascinating. May I ask why you're there? Why you're there in Kharkiv?
Ask away.
Please. How did you end up our man in Kharkiv?
What happened? I am from Chile. My accent doesn't make it sound that way. And I grew up. I spent a lot of time in the United States. My father worked in finance, and I went to university in the United States. I went to Dartmouth. And I worked in Hollywood as a writer, and then I published novels, and then got involved into different businesses. And in 2000,
we've just heard how those businesses went.
2012, I met a Ukrainian woman in Germany because I had some friends in Germany, and I went to visit them. And I was living in Paris at the time, and the usual happened. Fell in love. She was the au pair of these acquaintances, and fell in love, and now we have a couple of kids, they are far away from me at this time. And we came to live here in 2016 because her family's from here. And I thought it would be, nice to live here for a while. And then I had different businesses that I had to attend to in London and Amsterdam. And so this was like a good base of operation while the kids grew up and learned Russian and Ukrainian. And this situation arose, and it caught me personally. I was in.
Yeah. Of course, he's not going to push back on these. Coach Redpill is the wonderful guest he always wanted. He's doing his job for him. He just gets to sit there. He just gets to sit there. I mean, you could at least maybe push back or mention. Galloway hasn't even mentioned about Mariupol because at this time, obviously last week, we had started to see the devastation of what had happened in Mariupol. So, yeah, like I say, if he ever ends up in a siege like in Mariupol, he's going to absolutely piss his pants. This hard man is going to get a proper education in his civilized war.
In Kiev, I went out to Kiev on some trivial business, just some residency stuff that I had to take care of. And I was supposed to be there for 2 nights, and I arrived the day before the invasion. So I had front row seats to that. And insofar as the invasion, I've had this hobby of being a YouTuber, and I was winding it down last year. Late last year, I was just winding it down because, I'd had a good run. It was fun. But what happened was that I started reporting on what was going on in Kiev. And I would go up and down Kreshchatyk Avenue, videotaping myself and showing the sights as the war developed. And what I noticed early on that made me no friends among many people was that the Zelensky regime was handing out firearms willy-nilly to the population. In the end, they distributed something like 10,000 weapons. And at the time, I thought that this was exceedingly dangerous because you don't know who you're giving these weapons to. And these civilians who are going to use these weapons, they don't know how to use them because it's not enough to know how to shoot a gun. You have to know how to move with as a team,
Yeah, they've been arming the population of Kiev because they thought that they were going to come under siege. And they were like, look, anyone who wants a weapon can have one. And to be honest, that is pretty much, a valid military strategy. This goes all the way back to, I'm pretty sure the Soviets had like special civilian units. I know that the Germans had what were they called now? Was it the Volkssturm regiments or something like that? Of like the old and the young men. This is obviously it's a military tactic when you think you're not going to win. And a lot of people were saying, we don't think we're going to win, especially in that first week. And those first couple of days where they were, again, handing out most of those weapons, saying, here's a rifle for everyone. Take one. Take one. That's what they were doing. They were like, we're going to come under siege. Everyone needs to have a gun. And, it's Russian open season as far as they were concerned.
I mean, there's a reason that soldiers train. It's not just picking up a gun and aiming and shooting. You have to know how to move, know how to react.
Oh, and they have actually been offering training with the weapons, by the way. There have been a couple of members of parliament actually demonstrating at these at these locations where they've been teaching people how to use weapons. So again, he's completely 100% wrong on that.
So that you are effective and don't injure yourself or other people. And so I thought it was crazy. And I said that criminals were going to get these weapons, and lo and behold, they got them. And I witnessed how there were shootouts in Kiev. I witnessed them, not that I saw them, I heard them. I would hear, automatic fire
again
in downtown Kiev, and the distance of it was not more than, say, 250 meters to 500 meters on the outside, at a time when it was known that the closest Russian fighters were 30, 40 kilometers away. So it was obvious that what was happening was that these weapons fell into the hands of criminals, as has been later confirmed. And these criminals started using them on the civilian population, on each other, settling scores and whatnot. And that's why I started paying attention to the Zelensky regime, because as a foreign...
no evidence of what he has just said there about these weapons ending up in criminals, these criminals using being actors. There's no evidence. Absolutely not.
In Ukraine. As a foreigner in any country, quite frankly, I think it's wrong for a foreigner to be discussing and having an opinion about the local governance. After all, you're a guest. And so my thinking has been always like, when I go to somebody's house as a guest, I don't tell them, to change the wallpaper or why do they have the furniture the way that they do. It's their business. And if I like it or don't like it, I have to just keep it to myself. That's always been my attitude. And so insofar as the Ukrainian political situation is concerned, I never had an opinion, and I never really paid attention to it deliberately so that I would never fall into this trap of having an opinion where I'm a guest and not a citizen, where as a resident, I'm allowed certain privileges, but I'm not able to vote, I'm not able to change, and I shouldn't. I mean, that's me, that's my opinion, or the way I think one ought to handle oneself as a guest in the country. But when the invasion happened, I started paying attention to the Zelensky regime for the first time. And I started doing some digging on the Zelensky regime. And I realized that Zelensky himself is an actor, and he is literally a puppet. He was...
Congratulations. Zelensky had a career as an actor, but so did Ronald Reagan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm pretty sure there are other members of Congress or even politicians. You are allowed to have a career of different before you go into politics. Yeah, yeah, it's a miracle. A Brexit benefit just threw past my window. What a miracle!
Put into position by a Ukrainian Israeli Cypriot oligarch by the name of Igor Kolomoisky, who is a nasty character. This oligarch has basically created a television program called Servant of the People and cast Zelensky as the lead, and artificially inflated this television program by bribing people and getting a lot of publicity for the show, even though the show in and of itself is fairly mediocre. But it got a lot of people's attention, and Zelensky as a
yeah. now he's going after his acting career. He's going. He's just going on for so long, just parroting his acting career. This is just. I think you guys get the point. I think you get the point, but what's obviously worrying, of course, is when you go to the comments. So I have never seen anything in my life like Zelensky. When I see people who cannot even find Ukraine on a map calling a hero just because the media tells them to, makes me sick. No, he's a hero because of the way he's been acting. He's been acting the way that a president should act to help defend his country when it's getting invaded. Oh dear. He's following these people because they are honest with their voices and a ration of truth. Again, an independent journalist that is far more professional than the mass media, and yet he's just had well, given what we said earlier on, with the bizarre takes he's had on dating, very, very bizarre indeed. Both of you rendering excellent analysis on reporting of Kharkiv and Ukraine. I don't think you could get anywhere close to the accuracy of what they've just spouted nonsense about Ukraine there. I'm impressed. This guest is observant and smart. He has also got the take I have to agree with. Putin is no monster compared with the ones who run my side of the pond. Respect on steroid to Mr. Lara. He needs to keep his appearances unknown and safe. Yeah, just people parroting more and more stuff. Tell you what, let's level the playing field, shall we? Let's level the playing field on this. When's Galloway's taking call again? He's actually live now at this moment, Cathal. He's live now at this moment in time. We could call in if we wanted to, but I don't know if we'd get on. But let's do something else instead that will annoy him. So Mr. Lyra take on Ukraine is so off. It's like his fence on. Hang on, let me get back to that. I just want to quote it exactly. Let's see, where is it? Where is it? Where's this quote? Yeah, there we go. I'll just grab that. There we go. There we go. I think that deserves to be posted in full because it's quite a revealing comment of what he was on about. Also, if Russia's war on Ukraine is so, quote, civilized, how do you explain the images of there we go. The images of Mariupol and other scenes of Poland war crimes, because that's what they are. There we go. Another another fantastic comment underneath this video. Hang on. There we go. So I'm just going to post this. If you would like to, that comment is now live. This is the video link that I'm posting in chat now. So if you would like to go to that video and first of all like that comment and maybe leave your own comments about some of the comments that we've heard tonight, I would welcome you to to do that. Yes, we are kicking the beehive in Galloway's comments. Well and truly. So please do go to that video. Like I say, I've left the link in the chat. Go give that a like. Leave your own comments about his, quite frankly, batshit comments he makes about Ukraine, and tell Galloway what an absolute fool he is, or cracking journalist for having such a well and truly despicable man on his channel as an interview guest. Top job once again to George Galloway, getting the quote best guest. And by the way, we are not done with George Galloway in any way, shape, or form. George Galloway has become an absolute content mine because he's done very recently, which we're probably going to do next week, Galloway's panel. Hang on, I'll just drop it again in the for you again. Like I say, that's a link to the video. Like I say, oh, you voted for this guy during the Batley and Spen by-election? Oh wow, that was a wasted vote. That was certainly a wasted vote there, my friend. But yeah, we will be covering more of George Galloway's bizarre takes because he had a panel on what can only be described as a pro-Assad television channel. So you know what takes we're about to probably hear. We're not going to do it today, but I think we'll probably end up doing it next week. of his absolutely well and truly crazy takes he has on this. Oh, please drop a link in the post stream. I will do. Don't worry. I'll remember to do that. So as always, hopefully I'll be able to by next week be able to shake this damn cough because it's been annoying as hell. Hopefully this isn't long COVID. Fingers crossed. But of course, as always, thank you very much, one and all, for joining me. Like I say, come join us next. Are we available? Yes, we are available next Saturday morning for the good old good morning walk. And as always, remember to hit the like and share button before we end. And of course, we'll see you all in a bit. Whereas I'll post a link comment. I'll end the stream. I'll post a link in the post stream in the real chat down below. And like I say, give it a like and leave your own comments about the guest that George Galloway had. So yeah, crack on, ladies and gentlemen, crack on. And once again, we'll see you all very soon. And once again, thank you very much to all the people who have supported the channel today through super chats. Thank you very much. Your support is always very much appreciated. If you would like to support the channel yourself, there are links down below to my Patreon page and my one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, if you are new, do hit the subscribe button so we can see more videos where we talk about British politics, etc., etc. And of course, as always, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.